Sheikh Khalik, esteemed guest, Brother Bruce Kadoura, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to invite all of you to the special program today entitled Islamic Approach to Personal Finance by Brother Bruce Kadoura. Just a quick background on him before he starts. He was actually from a Muslim family born in Michigan. He lived there his first half of his life and then moved to Florida for the second half of his life. He has over 40 years of experience. He founded a firm called Kadoura and Company. It's a professional tax practice service. He's the CEO of Intercontinental Pharma. He also has extensive real estate and halal mortgage financing expert. He's also the founder of Sadaqah Charities, and also another center is the founder of the American Muslim Center in Dearborn, Michigan in 1993. So I'd like if we could all recite salawat as we introduce him.
Pretty much one. You stand here. Yeah.
We can just see this on the...
Okay. Can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to thank everybody for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Beautiful mosque that you have, and my first time here, so it's very impressive. We're going to talk about finance tonight in the various aspects of it. In particular, we're going to start off with college planning. Now, many of the people in here, it looks like, are all beyond college, so I'm sure you have some children or grandchildren that you might want to finance in college. So we'll talk about that a little bit. There's three basic ways that, three basic things that you can do to finance a college education, or for that matter, an undergraduate education. Simply put, simple savings account, where you put money in the bank and you save it, you put it into an account that you use specifically for college. Now, that doesn't make you any money, right? Because we as Muslims are not supposed to receive interest. So if we don't receive interest, then how are you supposed to build a fund? So a simple bank account is probably not the most tax efficient. You'll notice I say tax efficient method of doing this. Okay? Tax efficient means that you're going to pay the most in tax if you're not tax efficient, and the least in tax if you are tax efficient. Okay? Now, bank accounts are pretty much, except for checking, are haram. Brokerage accounts, where you go to a stockbroker, Merrill Lynch, or any one of those, and you open a brokerage account to fund the education of the child, that's halal. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as the stocks they're investing in are halal. And that's a whole different discussion that we can't get into tonight, but these are just some of the methods. Now, number 1, 2, and 3, or yeah, 1, 2, and 3, or 1, A, and B. Okay, anyway. That's not the method you want to use if you can avoid it. The second thing that we want to talk about is what's called a Section 529 plan. A 529 plan is part of the IRS code. That's why it's called 529. It's Section 529 of the IRS code. And what it does, it allows you to put your after-tax income. In other words, you've already paid tax on the money, but you want to put it away for your child's education. You say, well, what benefit is that? Well, there is a benefit to it in that the money earns, okay, goes up in value as time goes on, and you don't pay any tax on it. And the first method, 1, 2, and 3 up there, you have to pay tax currently each and every year on it. So you're losing some of your money in taxes. The 529 plan, you don't pay any tax on any of the money until such time as it's being used. So you might go on 18 years, 19 years, and all of a sudden at the end of that period, you start paying for the child's tax. Whatever the earnings are at that point, that's when you pay some tax, okay? But not you, the child pays it. The beneficiary pays it, okay? So that part is very tax efficient because you've taken money that you've already earned and paid tax on, you're putting it away for college education, and you're not going to pay any tax on the earnings of it, on the earnings, in other words, the dividends, until such time as you start to use it. Now, what can you invest in? Brokerage accounts are usually what people use. Mutual funds, laddered CDs, which we can't do as Muslims, of course, and commercial paper, which, again, we really can't do as Muslims unless they're dividends. So that's basically a 529 plan. Why were these things put into place? Mainly they were put into place by Congress so that, two reasons. Get safe for college tax efficiently and to help out, you know, the people in New York, of course, Wall Street. Okay. Okay, the earnings on these accounts are tax deferred, as I mentioned, until the students begin to use the funds, okay? Earnings are taxed at the beneficiary's tax rate, whoever the beneficiary is. Now, if you put a child through medical school, and you can use it for medical school or any other school, then you're going to pay, your child may end up making more money than you, in which case it's not a benefit. But in most cases it's going to be a benefit, but because by that time, when it's used, the child, while it's being used, the child is going to be paying tax at a very low rate. Okay, generally speaking, they'll be paying tax at a very low rate, if any. If I do the tax return, they don't pay any, but that's another story for another time. It's important to note that these instruments are bought, or these investments are bought with after-tax income. All right? Again, I want to stress that. This is not like an IRA where it's deducted from your income each year as you go along. This is a totally different type of investment. You've already paid tax on this money, you're putting it away, and the benefit is that you're not going to pay any tax on the earnings as you're going along. Okay. This is one of the best things I think that governments have ever come up with, the state prepaid tuition plans. I'm sure you probably all heard of these, okay? Where you make a contribution to your state fund, and the state guarantees 4 years of college for that particular student excuse me, with no cost for tuition or fees. Now, you can still have to pay for books, you still have to pay for room and board, that doesn't change. So, in that respect, it's still pretty expensive to do if you're going to use this method just simply to pay for the child's tuition, because there's still significant cost in housing, in books, and other college costs. The other thing to remember is that many universities require freshmen and sophomores to live on campus for the first 2 years, which means you're going to be paying for room and board even though the tuition's covered. Now, one good thing about this is, sorry, went too far. Okay, one good thing about this is that you can combine the plans. You can have a 529 plan, the one we talked about to begin with, and you can pay into the state prepaid tuition program. So you can have two things going on at one time. The 529 plan pays for the housing costs and the fees, and the state prepaid tuition plan pays for the tuition. Of course, we all like our kids to get scholarships, right? So what happens? What happens when you get a scholarship? Let's say my granddaughter's a good example. She just graduated from high school. We paid into a state prepaid tuition plan for her, and she ended up getting a full ride scholarship to a university. What happens? Oh, put all this money into it, now she can't use it. Well, she can use it, okay? Or you can use some of it for her if she needs it, or you can give it to another child. Or you can use it yourself. You can basically give it to anybody you want, okay? If in fact your child ends up with a full ride scholarship. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar, really. I mean, pretty amazing. It really is. Okay. When I stop at each section of these, I usually ask, does anybody have any questions? But I'm not going to do that tonight because I guess you have a question and answer period afterward. Okay. Whoops. I think I messed up. Okay. Finance for our youth. What do we teach our children? Okay? We teach our children what we do. Okay? So if we're smart with money, they're going to be smart with money, aren't they? Isn't that the way it really works? They learn from us. So if you're not smart with money, they're not going to be very smart with money. If you're a spendthrift, they're going to be a spendthrift, okay? If you're a saver, they're going to be a saver. So it's best, if you can, try to emulate the Islamic way of doing things and learn. We're here in America, okay? And there's certain laws and restrictions you have to follow in America. One's filing tax returns, those sorts of things. But knowing the banking system is a really important item and something I think we should all pay attention to. Because the banking system in America and in most Western countries is basically haram. I mean, if you think about it, we take the money that they give us, okay, or they take the money we put in the bank account and they use it for haram things. You know, they pay out interest on it, they invest in different things that are not halal. So this is the system. However, you know, we have to work within that system because we live here. It's almost impossible to live without a bank account of some kind. All right. So it's based upon two things, the banking system. It's based on interest, which is haram in Islam, and fees. Fees are halal from what I understand. I should ask the sheikh that, right? Okay. Okay, fees are halal. So they can charge us fees, there's nothing haram in that, but the interest portion is what makes it haram. So these are the two things that Western banking is based on. Now, little background. I think it's important that you know this. How did banking all start? Well, current modern banking. Now I'm only going to go back to the British, okay? And all the things that the British have done, and this is one of the things they left us with. When banks were first started in England, they were basically investment houses. They didn't pay out interest. They didn't take in people's deposits. You had wealthy people put money together and they invested it. They were called investment houses. Well, that morphed came over to America, of course, and they decided that Americans, you know, we ought to do things a little bit differently than they do. So they started taking everybody's money in, okay, and telling them, you know, we're going to pay you an interest rate on your money. Everybody thought that was great. I'm going to make money just putting money in the bank. Well, of course, the crash happened in 1929, and some of the banks went bust, and now we have new regulations. You have what's called the FDIC, okay? All this is just added to the haram. So we as Muslims have to try to avoid all this to the most extent that we can. So that's why I say you got to get your children used to doing the Islamic way of doing things. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. To the best extent you can. Start investing at a young age. Don't wait until they're 15, 16 years old and then try to teach them, because if you have teenagers or you've had teenagers, you know that's a waste of time. You can't teach them anything, right? They know it all. So you want to try to teach them when they're really young. What I've done with my own children, and I advise people, is to take the money that they earn, and they invest it. Invest it in halal things to begin with. What you'll find out is that there's greater blessings in this way of investing for them and for you. Okay, they're going to learn the halal way of doing things. So you can put it in cash accounts if you want. These days banks don't pay much of anything on bank accounts, but I'd avoid that one pretty much if you could. I'm just putting this up here as some choices for you. Real estate, believe it or not, you can put your child's money into real estate. And that's a whole other subject we can talk about at another time when we have a session just based on that purpose, just to talk about that one item. Mutual funds, again, stockbrokers, annuities, and retirement accounts. Yes, you can have a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old have a retirement account. It can happen, okay? So, but you need to set it up properly. We can talk about that. Again, this number 2 here is a subject that we could spend an entire hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on. I mean, there's a whole range of things we can talk about. Okay. What I suggest is that you allow your child to spend up to 30% of the money they make. The rest they invest, probably 60% of the rest they invest, and give at least 10%, hopefully more, to sadaqah, okay? Give to charity. Let them learn at an early age to give to charity. If you don't teach them at a young age, they're not going to learn that, okay? Then the shaitan gets in their heart, says, why should I give my money away? I earned it, okay? This is common thought today. I hear children talk about this. This is what they do. All right. There we go. Oops. Go back one. There we go. Okay. Let's talk about debt a little bit. There's credit card debt. You should never get a credit card until you know you can pay the balance every month. And teach your children this. This is really important. Because now, child goes to college, what do? They start getting flooded with credit card applications. You don't even know about it, okay? It's coming to them in their dorm rooms, believe it or not. They get this thing, oh, you got $10,000 coming, you know? Oh, you know, it's party time, you know? I'm going to join the sorority or fraternity or whatever, you know? I'm going to have a good time this weekend. I got 10 grand to spend. Well, the one rule of thumb of the credit card, any credit card, doesn't matter which brand it is to make sure you can pay the balance every single month by the due date or before so that you're not paying any interest. Because as you know, the interest is haram, Islamically haram. Okay, besides that, the rates that they charge are high because it's unsecured credit. Okay, mortgage debt. Now, I've heard fatwas both directions. Some say we're in America, we can do it in America because that's the only way you can buy a house. I've heard other imams say, well, you rent until you can afford to buy. To buy a house without a mortgage, you got to have one or two things. You got to have a really slick tongue or a lot of money, okay? And if you can talk a seller into selling you a home with no riba, with no interest, you're better off, okay? That's the best way of doing it. As a matter of fact, I got to tell you, growing up, I'm old enough to remember this because my parents bought a house, okay, riba free. And how did they do it? They went to the brick company who happened to own the land and had built the house. See, this is the way they used to do things back then. We didn't have mortgage companies. We didn't have banks doing this, okay? You go to the person who owned the land, say, I'm going to buy your land. And they say, okay, how much? And you tell them, and they say, okay, here's my down payment, and I'm going to pay you so much each month until it's paid. That was it. Halas, done. Finito, as they say in Spanish, okay? This is how things used to be done. Not anymore. Now we have mortgages, okay? And by the way, this is just my opinion. I have a lot of anecdotal evidence to prove this, that the reason real estate prices are so high today is because of mortgages. When people can borrow money, large sums of money to buy a house, they have an incentive to overspend on that house. And that's reality, okay? So keep that in mind. Always, always, always try to do one of two things when buying a home. Try to not pay any interest and save as much as you can for a down payment. Because a buyer, or a seller, excuse me, a seller is going to be more interested in selling you the property if you tell them, I can give you 30% down, and I'll pay the balance in 3 years or 5 years. And I'm willing to pay your asking price, but I'm not going to pay you any interest. I've seen this work. It actually happens. It really does. If you really want that to work, it can work for you. Now, some of you guys in here are young enough to really appreciate this. Some of you aren't. Like this guy here is not paying attention, but that's okay. He doesn't have to. He's a young guy yet. All right. Student loan debt. That's the other thing that happens. Okay? Students go to school. They automatically think, in order to have a college education, I got to take out student loans. Most people who graduate from medical school today owe the student loans of $250,000. Lawyers own about $150,000, okay? Now, they're better able to pay those loans, but they still had to borrow the money from a financial institution in order to do it. There's $1.7 trillion with a T, out there in outstanding student loans right now in this country. These could be eliminated through 529 plans and the state guaranteed tuition payment program. Use these. Use them when the kids are young and your grandchildren when they're young. Okay, if you're going to invest, by the way, most people invest in state guaranteed tuition programs. Most of them are grandparents. They're not the parents, because parents can't afford it. So the grandparents put the money up for the grandchildren to go to college. Most of you probably don't know that. Just raise your hand. Anybody in here have a 529 plan? Anybody in here have a guaranteed state tuition program? No? Okay, but something for you to think about then. All right. Any other type of debt, personal loans, of course, when you're paying money to a bank on a car loan or anything like that, where they're charging interest, those are haram. And I try never to buy a new car anyway. But, you know, sometimes you can. If I have enough cash, I'll buy a new car. If I don't have enough cash, I don't. I get a used car, but I always try to pay cash when I buy one. One thing to remember, this is really important. You'll hear people say, well, there's good debt and there's bad debt. The good debt they talk about is, well, I'm going to buy a piece of property and I'm going to collect enough rent off that property in order to pay the loan off, and the rent's going to pay the loan, okay? Okay, that's wonderful, except for one thing. 2007, 2008 happened, and all the property values dropped from 100% down to 60%. And the guy that was in there can't pay the rent because he's unemployed. Okay? There is no good debt. There's no such thing as good debt. Debt is debt. It's all bad. Okay? So just remember that. The other thing that debt does, it creates a lifestyle that stops you from doing other things. Okay? You can't invest as much, maybe to buy a home. You can't invest as much in a business. You can't do the things you might like to do without having the debt. So debt doesn't help. Let's go. There we go. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. General points. When you have a bank account, or a brokerage account, or credit cards, anything like that, always check your balances daily, okay? I check mine every day. Credit cards, bank balances, brokerage accounts. Always, every single day. The reason I do that is because I found that, number one, banks will charge you fees when they say they're not going to, so I catch it right away, and they reverse them. The other reason is people steal money out of your bank account. And you'll know about it right away if you check it daily. At least check it weekly, okay? I mean, maybe you're not going to do it daily, you don't have time. But at least check it weekly, all right? It's really important. And I've saved a lot of money, you know, by simply checking my bank account. I probably saved $3,000 a year in bank service fees that they would have charged me had I not been watching, all right? $3,000 is a lot of money. That's an investment, isn't it? All right. The other thing to check is your bills. Frontier Communication, I'll give you a real life example that happened to me. Frontier Communication was, every time I received my invoice in the mail, I said, why are they charging me a late charge? I paid the bill on time. Well, it turns out that they were mailing the bill on the 4th of the month. It didn't get to me till the 15th of the month, and it was due on the 19th of the month. So I scheduled it on the 15th to be paid on the 19th. They get the check on the 19th. They don't deposit it to the 23rd. Because they deposited it on the 23rd, they considered it late and charged me a service fee. So these are the things some of these credit card companies and others will do to you if you don't know better, all right? So it's very important to keep track of that. Oh, where are we at now? Yeah. If you're going to invest in anything, what I recommend you do is ask somebody who knows about it. Because there's a lot of people out there who will try to sell you on an idea. For instance, let me give you an example. Somebody comes to you and says, you know, this franchise is it's Burger King franchise. There's one for sale, and man, you know, I've been running a Burger King. I've been a manager of a Burger King for the last 15 years, okay? And I know how to run a Burger King. Now, if you can put up the money and buy the franchise, I'll run it for you. How many of you have heard that story before? How many times have you heard the story before? Okay? I hear it a lot, okay? So before you do any investing like that, please ask someone that knows something about the business. Check out the people that you're dealing with. You may think you know somebody. You may think, I've known this guy for 20 years. I've known this guy 10 years. You don't really know him until you do business with him, okay? Believe me, when I tell you this is the truth. This is really reality. So be very careful. All right. Yeah, well, I just covered that. Beware of ventures that where you provide the cash and they provide the expertise. Yeah. If they have no what's called skin in the game, then they have much less reason to make it a success or to keep trying to make it a success. Okay. Make sure if you do get into a venture, after you've completely done your what's called due diligence meaning that you've diligently checked everything you're supposed to on the deal. After you've done all that, make sure you have legally binding agreements in writing. It's not only a good thing to do in this country, but it's also halal. This is what we've been advised to do by Allah, is to put our agreements in writing. Okay? So, that's it. Questions and answers. We're there. Okay. I guess we're going to break for a while. We're going to have some. We'll do the questions and answers after the break. Thank you. I hope I haven't bored you.